Welcome back, Airline Club enthusiasts. This is episode 13, and it's a very special episode, first of all, because it's been quite a while since I've done anything with this on YouTube. So it's been about 6 weeks since the last time you saw anything from Ascendant Airways, which is longer than the entire 12 episodes that you have seen so far. I just got busy, and now I'm getting back to it. But during that time, I was checking in on the airline and setting up new routes, extending bases, and so on. I just haven't done any recording. And I haven't paid quite as close of attention to the airline as I normally might have. But the other reason that this is a special episode is because this is a shareholders meeting, and you will help me decide where to open a new base. But first, we'd better get the lay of the land. So let's take a look at the flight map. Here's London Heathrow. You can see there are quite a few flights extending out of there, some of them into the UK, and quite a few into the rest of Europe, and also one or two international or intercontinental flights as well. If we look at London Stansted, we see, again, a whole bunch of flights into Central Europe, a few into Spain. And we look at Gatwick. There are some flights to the UK, but mostly, again, into Central and Southern Europe. And taking a quick look at Warsaw, we see that there are quite a few flights into Poland itself, one of which is losing a lot of money, but I just am willing to accept that because I want to keep my passenger numbers high in Poland. Finally, we have Naples, which covers Southern Europe fairly well. It's got flights back to London and a few up north. Quite a few, I guess, if you add them all up. Oh, that's not supposed to be the case. There's probably something going wrong there. As far as intercontinental flights are concerned, we now have a couple to China, including one that's going to our allies' base in Canton, or Guangzhou. And then we have these two transatlantic flights, neither of which has a great deal of capacity yet, because I just haven't been able to afford big enough planes. And here, I'm pretty disappointed about this dip, because this is Stansted to Philadelphia, and one of our allies has a hub in Philadelphia, so I would have expected really strong demand here. And, I guess we do have a fair number of flights already, but still, I would think that there would be even more capacity. And sometimes there's just kind of an anomaly, so the fact that there's one dip doesn't mean too much by itself. Okay, one thing I want to take a close look at is the link between Heathrow and Stansted. So that's this flight right here. You can see London Heathrow to Stansted. I'm using the MD-90. I'll talk more about my plane selection in a little bit, but it's pretty much packed, and I'm at 32 flights per week, which is more than you can normally do, but our alliance is doing pretty well, so we get that extra little bonus to go from 30 to 32. So until I get bigger planes, this is as much capacity as I can manage, and yet if we look at the chart, it's only a pretty small percentage of the total. And the reason this route is so important to us is because it links these two hubs. So if we look at the passenger map, we see that it provides us with a pretty large number of transfer passengers, and also some to our ally Sky Chariot, because they have a base in London Heathrow. That's what I tried to explain in one of the previous episodes. You can't overlap extension hubs with an ally, but you can have a hub in the same airport as the headquarters of one of your allies. So that's what's going on in London Heathrow. So something to keep in mind is that Stansted and Heathrow are linked, but Gatwick is totally on its own. So it's like a totally different network. Let's take a quick look at a couple cities here. I have 2 flights to Cadiz, one from Gatwick and one from Heathrow. So these don't compete whatsoever because there's no direct way to get from Heathrow to Gatwick. But if we look at Sevilla, there are 2 flights coming in here, one from, oh, I must have been thinking of a different city. Well, let's look at Valencia then, because I love to fly to Valencia, it seems. And they're coming from all 3 airports. So obviously both Heathrow and Stansted are flying here. If I had a really strong connection between those 2 airports, that would be redundant. I'm not sure if I'm there yet, but it's a little bit inefficient to have flights from both Stansted and Heathrow. So eventually I might end up canceling one of those so that I can fly somewhere else instead and expand the overall network. All right, next I want to take a look at the airplanes. Now, before, the airline was still pretty new, and so we were flying mostly Brasilias. But you can see there are only 8 left in service, and actually these are very rapidly aging. I need to replace them. So that's going to have to be a priority to get some other planes and swap these out. I'll probably use a bigger plane. I'm not going to buy any more Brasilias. So the mainstay of my network now, really the entire airline, are these MD-90s. And I'm quite fond of these. Their fuel economy is not the best, but they're a fairly cheap plane. They have 160 capacity, which is pretty good for my needs. And it's especially cheap when it's a favorite. So that's knocked the price all the way down to 72 million and the delivery time down to 5 weeks. So that's pretty nice. You can see that by far the biggest users of this plane are our airline and my other airline, Sky Chariot. So clearly I'm a fan of this plane. I'm not quite sure why other people have neglected it, but I'm perfectly happy with that because it means that I've gotten to buy more of them at the discount. We also have quite a few of these Embraer 170-200s left over. I was just getting into these, and for quite a while it was a favorite, so I got a discount on that. It's a good short-range plane. Again, this one's kind of a short-range plane. Not terribly short, because as they get bigger, the ranges tend to get longer anyway, but compared to other planes in its class, it's short range. And then we've also moved up to Airbus 321s for a while. This is another one that we have had a favorite on, so a lot of these we bought at a discount, in addition to the discount that already exists, which is pretty substantial. So if I want to buy more of these, I will probably click here and do this again to get the 6% discount and drop the delivery time down to 9 weeks. And you can see once again that I also did this as Sky Chariot because when I find a plane I like, I tend to buy it for both airlines. Another advantage of the MD-90 is that it shares a family with the MD-81. And the MD-81 is special because it's the largest plane that can land at a 2-scale airport. There are quite a few 2-scale airports. Some of them are actually fairly large and definitely worth flying to. but they tend to be ignored by a lot of the larger airlines who don't want to mess with smaller planes. However, we are not at that point yet, so again, I'm pretty fond of the MD-81 as well. I pretty much only use them when I want to fly to a Scale 2 airport, because I can get an MD-90 cheaper. So if I can use the MD-90, I will, but this one's only 10 seats smaller, so it's really very good for competing at a level 2 airport. And then, not finally, but we also have these Embraer 190s. These do good work for us because they have such long range, kind of decent capacity at 100. And their fuel economy is still pretty tolerable for a plane with that kind of range and size. So we make good profits on these 190s, and they're pretty cheap at $40 million. Then we have just a couple of these small planes. This is the largest plane that can land at a Scale 1 airport. The only reason I got a couple of these is to fly to small airports in Poland, where I'm really interested in competing for every passenger I can get, and I'm not as worried about profitability. And then finally, we have a couple of these long-range 767s with very large capacity compared to anything else we have, and enough range to reach China, which is where our two 767s are currently flying to. I'd love to get more, but they're just so much more expensive than the other stuff we fly. And frankly, I've been more focused on the European market because I've been trying to get champion points there. Okay, now let's take a look at the Office tab. Here are our profits. You can see they're relatively stable at around 8 million. So that's nice. I'm sure we can improve on that some, but for now, it's allowed us to accumulate some money. Here's the cash flow. Notice our debt is not too bad compared to our total cash flow. So if we need to borrow more money, that's certainly a possibility. This stuff is kind of interesting. I don't know if I've mentioned our livery yet. You can design yourself a livery once you hit 40 reputation. This is my own custom design. Here are the total routes we have available. We've gotten up to maybe 180, 190 or so. We can now have 9 intercontinental routes because we are in an alliance that's doing pretty well. We'll take a look at that in a little bit. For a long time now, I've kept my service quality at 70. I don't know if that's optimal or not, but it seems to be working out okay. We don't really try to compete with the really high quality airlines, but it gives us extra slots, and it comes in handy against some budget airlines. So it seems like a fairly good amount, and it's not terribly expensive. Here we can also see an overview of our bases, and you see that for the most part they're pretty close together in terms of scale. The one that stands out, I guess, is Warsaw, which I've had to increase in order to compete in Poland, but Warsaw's relatively inexpensive, so I've been able to do that. Okay, now taking a look at the bank. We have 2 outstanding loans, both for $500 million, and the interest rates for a while were very low, so I'm glad that I got to take advantage of that a bit. If I'd been more attentive, I probably could have gotten a good deal on even more loans, because interest rates were down, I think, around 10% or so, the kind of base rate. You can see that now if we wanted to borrow it would cost a bit more. And remember, of course, that this is actually the total interest that you will pay over the life of the loan, not the APR. Okay, we can take a quick look at oil just for fun. You see it's up pretty high right now. Unfortunately, about half of our overall oil needs, even more in fact, are at the mercy of the market. It's a conservative oil policy, but we're still paying quite a bit for oil. The 2 contracts that we signed were both for 200 weeks, so that was back probably around here somewhere. I don't think we got it that cheap. No. So somewhere in the early phase of these low prices, so most of the time that we've had these contracts, we've actually been losing money because the contract amount is always higher than the current price. Well, not always higher, but when it's low, which is when you want to take out a contract, it's higher than the current price. So we are paying about 61.5 to 62 for a barrel of oil. You can see that would be right around here, and only recently has that started paying off. So our oil contracts have not really done us very many favors. Nevertheless, we're still doing all right. Okay, now for the fun part. Let's take a look at the country tab. And our goal was to get on the leaderboard in Poland. We've done that. Here we are in 6th place. By flying all those routes into cities in Poland, we've managed to bring up our total Polish numbers. You can see there's very stiff competition. Look at all these airlines that are between 20 and 23,000. So we tend to bounce around quite a bit in this range. It would be great to be able to kind of vault ahead and put some distance between ourselves and these other airlines, but it would be quite an achievement to get up to 3rd place. You can see that 3rd place is much higher than 4th. In fact, I think very briefly we hit 4th place, but 5th is also good. We're pretty happy with that. And of course, the other country that we are competing in is the UK. And here we are also on the leaderboard in 8th place, which is not too bad. There's a pretty good lead we have over 9th place, so we don't have to worry too much about slipping down the ranks. But as with Poland, there's quite a bit of competition in this fairly narrow range between 70 and 80,000 passengers. And then there's a big jump up to 5th place. So clearly we're nowhere near getting into 5th place. That would be pretty hard because we already have 3 decent-sized bases in the UK. Now they still have room for growth. So I think that we're going to be able to compete very strongly with To the Sky and Airtro. I know that To the Sky is a pretty big airline. I think they're relatively new, but they end up competing with a lot of my allies, and they've grown quickly, and they're now part of a big alliance. So if we can stay ahead of them, I'll be happy with that. And we'd really like to move up into this 6th place slot and stay there if we can, at least until we can take 5th place. Overall, I would describe our strategy in the UK as kind of a brute force technique. We've just put bases in the 3 largest airports, and they kind of operate separately. Heathrow and Stansted I'm trying to link a little more closely, but for the most part, we've just used quite a few bases, and we're going to try to outnumber the competition that way. But let's take a look at our alliance now. I've mentioned it a couple times. We're currently sitting in 10th place. Sometimes we've managed to get up to 9. So here we are now. You can see we're fairly close with our rival Comfort and Style. And this, of course, is based on champion points. The points you get from being ahead in a particular country, or being on the leaderboard, I guess is how I've described it. So, one of the nice things about being in 10th is we get this flight frequency increase. That's the reason that we were able to increase to 32 flights on that Heathrow to Stansted route. And of course we have a reputation increase of 3. And that's apparently just enough to get us up over 60, which gives us a couple different benefits. One of them is that we can fly more intercontinental routes, and another one is that we can open another base, which of course I'll be getting to pretty quickly here. So you can see here we are earning some points for our alliance, and here as well. So we are finally contributing members to the Grandeur Air League. Okay, here's our alliance flight map, and this is something that we'll want to keep in mind when making a decision about where to put a new base. So you can see that we have many different hubs in Europe. Some of them are kind of small, but overall our presence in Europe is definitely very strong. So that would help us out if we choose to set up another base in Europe. Taking a look at North America, there are definitely some bases here, but it's not exactly saturated or anything. Still, it would be helpful for any North American presence. South America, this is a fairly new base. It's only scale 1, so I'm not really very interested in that. Likewise in Africa, there are probably champion points to be had, but I might just leave them for our African-based teammate there. And finally, in East Asia, there are several hubs here, and it's actually a pretty strong network, especially here in Guangzhou. I think this is the base with the single largest number of passengers from one of our airlines. You can see 134,000 there. So now for the really fun part. This is where we decide where to put a new base. So long as we stay above 60 reputation, we will be able to do that. And that's not exactly a guarantee, but I think even if I lose too much reputation, I'll be able to claw my way back eventually. So I will go ahead and wait for some input. You guys can let me know in the comments what base you would like to recommend, but as the majority shareholder, I have final say regardless of what you guys suggest. So even if every single comment says to put my base, up here, I'm just not going to do that. There are a few I would like to submit for consideration. One is Mexico City. Okay, I should first mention that my criteria for selecting a base is 1, I want to be able to earn more champion points in the country that it's in, and 2, I want it to help make profits. So I don't really want to go for some tiny little country, like maybe, I could set up a flight to one of these islands or something and get 1 champion point there. I'm not quite as interested in doing that since I've seen what we can accomplish with Warsaw. Oh, and this is actually probably a good enough time to mention, I forgot to look over all these routes. I meant to do that, but one of the important things I wanted to do was sort by profit and then take a look at Warsaw, because this is where my focus is almost entirely on gaining champion points. So you can see even the most profitable route isn't really all that profitable, and when we get down to the bottom, some of them are losing money, some of them are losing quite a bit of money, but they transport large numbers of passengers, and they help keep up my presence in Poland. So overall, I'm not even sure if my Warsaw base makes a profit. It looks like it probably does. Yeah, I guess it does. But I'm sure there are more profitable options. So ideally, I would like a base that is both profitable and that earns champion points. So now that we've covered that, let's take another look at Mexico City. One of the advantages of Mexico City is that we already have an ally here in Mexico. So maybe we would actually be competing with our ally, and that's not good, I'm not sure. Or maybe this would work to our advantage because he could help round up passengers from Mexico and then ship them to Mexico City, which might be their final destination. Actually, we would have to be the ones to take that route. Yeah, so if we took out a route from Mexico City to GDL, then we could complete that final leg of the journey. And if they stopped in Mexico City, or if they continued on to another city in Mexico, I believe we would get the passenger count for that one. To be perfectly honest, I don't actually know how the numbers are calculated. In any case, the other advantage of Mexico City is that Sky Chariot, my other airline, has a headquarters here in Dallas, already flies to Mexico City with 1,700. Obviously, that number could be increased pretty dramatically if there were a hub here. And Dallas is pretty well placed to transfer American passengers down to Mexico City. And from here, they could branch out to various destinations in Mexico. And so I think that Sky Chariot would be a big asset here. And Sky Chariot is quite a bit richer than Ascendant, but has no easy access to champion points. So it would kind of give them something to do in terms of champion points if they could funnel a bunch of passengers down to Mexico City, which, by the way, they are already doing for Guadalajara. Yeah, that's 3,000 passengers. It's by far the largest number. I think it's about 3/4 of the total traffic on this route. Okay, so that's Mexico City. Oh, one thing I noticed looking at Mexico, and I guess we have to do this anyway. Let's find Mexico on the list here. The reason I'm looking at Mexico is because it's only 13,000 to get 10th place, and it doesn't rise too quickly after that. So, maybe if we can get to 13,000, we can get to 16,000, and that would put us in 7th place or something like that. I'm not totally sure what the market is like in Mexico. But interestingly, if we take a look at Mayan Air, we see that they have definitely used a brute force strategy in Mexico. Look at that, a total of 6 hubs. So it's no wonder that they are the leader in Mexico, and there's obviously no way that we would ever be able to compete with that, which is fine. We don't need first place. Okay, so that was Mexico. Another possibility is to just continue putting bases in the United Kingdom. So I would probably want to use Manchester because that's the next biggest one, and it's got a little bit of distance from London, which I think is probably better since we're so committed to London. But we could also consider other large cities. This one maybe, no, that's only 1 million. Birmingham is 2 million. So if you think Birmingham is a better choice than Manchester, and that's what you want to recommend, I would certainly be willing to hear that out. If we take a look at the country, I know we've already looked at the UK. It would probably cement us in 6th place and it might even be necessary for us to compete for 5th, 6th, and so on. But I also kind of think that maybe we've already saturated the UK and there's no real need for a 4th base there. I'm not totally sure about that. So you can let me know in the comments. That's how you can express yourself. I'm not as interested in in-game chat because I might not read it, but I will definitely read the comments to this video. So the UK, that's a possibility. And the other one that I'm looking at very strongly is Italy, because we already have a base here in Naples, and Italy has quite a few large cities that we could choose from. I'm looking specifically at Milan, Venice, Verona, possibly Bologna, but that one's quite a bit smaller than the other ones, and of course Rome. So I haven't done a detailed analysis of these cities or anything, but you are welcome to, and make your recommendation. If we look at the country listing, Italy is worth quite a few reputation points. Even 10th place is worth 1.5, so that's pretty substantial. And we are currently at 30,000 without even really trying. In fact, if anything, I've neglected Naples because I've been more concerned with Warsaw and the UK. But we would need quite a few more passengers, but 55,000 seems manageable to me, given that we already have 30,000 in Naples. So with one more base, I think that we could move up, and of course, it's not just the 55,000 for 10th place. You know, we can go up a ways before it becomes very formidable. All right, so Italy is a consideration. And again, one of the nice things about Italy is that we have all those allied bases in Eastern Europe that can help us out. Oh, one more thing I was going to mention. When we first looked at Poland long ago, it was only 3,000 to get into 10th place. And that was pretty attractive to me. I was thinking, you know, hey, this is definitely a good place to go. Now, apparently, other people recognized that same thing. And so now Poland is much, much more competitive. Nevertheless, we've managed to be somewhat successful there. Although, as I pointed out, it has been costly. So I don't know how many bases we can support if they are losing money or barely making any money. And a couple more that I'll mention are Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. If we look at the country profile, we don't need very many passengers to get to 10th place, and it doesn't rise too quickly. It looks like we could get up to 7th with 10,000. So I'm not really sure if this is a good idea, but it's an option that I've considered, and so I'll just mention it. If you agree that that's a good option, I will certainly take more time to consider Saudi Arabia. Another one that we might consider is Indonesia, probably flying into Jakarta with 9.7 million. But here is about 2 million. Honestly, we'd probably go for, 3 million. I'm willing to consider these second-tier airports. Oh, now this has a tourism bonus in addition to 1 million people, so maybe Bali is a good option. I'm not sure. Obviously, we would need a long-range plane to get there, so it would be more expensive, but we still have that intercontinental flight available. So with enough money, we can definitely set up a base here in Southeast Asia, and as you may recall, we do have allies in this region. And if we look at the country tab here, Indonesia requires, some passengers. We have to get into 5th place to get anywhere at all, but once we do, there's already a few points available. All right, so those are all of the possibilities that I mentioned, or that I'm going to mention, but you are welcome to come up with your own as well. And as I said, I will take them into strong consideration if quite a few people recommend the same place and it makes sense. I'll probably do that if it seems like, I'm not being trolled or something. Now, one thing that you're probably thinking if you actually play this game is anywhere but Mexico, if you're in Mexico, or anywhere but Italy, or whatever. So I'm hoping that you will resist that temptation and act on behalf of Ascendant Airways in making your recommendation. Okay, so that's all for this episode. Leave your recommendation in the comments along with a brief explanation as to why you think that's a good idea, and I hope that we get some interaction on this. Thank you for watching. Go ahead and give this video a like if you've enjoyed it, and the next time we check back, I'm hoping that we will have a brand new base.